Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about Redux. So let's get into it. So the question in question was basically it was a response to the previous video that I made about testing and things like that, and this person seems to have liked my idea about feature toggles, and I'm glad to hear that because feature it's a very, I mean, even at large scale, it's a very useful thing. This is, if you didn't know, that one of the many strategies that companies such as, say, Google and so forth use in order to ship things with confidence. It's a very common practice. And so he writes, oh yeah, feature toggles, true that. Also, can I ask what your opinion is on Redux? Personally, with React hooks and context and React query, there is no reason to introduce the Redux library anymore. And I'm thinking of removing the Redux libraries we have from the code base in favor of just using the just using React context. What are your thoughts on this? Well, basically, I will tell you, don't waste time on that. There's really, well, let me elaborate on that a little bit. So, if you are working in a small company, which is the case here, and it's very likely that if you're the only front-end developer and like everything isn't really all that nice and so forth. I know that this sucks to hear, but there are more important things to worry about. So this is what I argue is one of the many marks of a senior developer and a mid-level junior type of experience, because what I argue to you is that a person who is truly mature in their role as a software developer needs to be able to figure out what is useful to do and what's not useful to do. Because the reality is that you can sit and improve things forever. It's actually funny because one of my favorite examples of this is when we talk about design, like web design. It doesn't have to be web design, but I hope you understand. Because if you give a designer a task, they can, in many cases, spend forever doing that thing. When is a design done, or when is a painting done? When is a song done? You could improve it forever and ever and ever, and find new things to polish and so forth. And as a software developer, in many ways, you can do that too. I mean, you could have and I've seen a few of these things happen where you have people who they spend time on trying to fix something that is so gosh darn pointless. And in some cases, the value of the thing they want to do is so subjective, but the risk is very real. An example was, and I could not understand it, but even the CTO thought that was a very, we should do this. The classic thing that happens when you work at a company is that people rebrand things within the company. They start out using a specific term for something in the domain that you're working in, and then they change that. And now you have all this code and all this documentation that says one thing, but they wanted to say the other thing. And the CTO said, oh, well, yeah, we should rename it. And I just sat there and I went, there's like thousands of references to this old word. And we have like APIs that are called, it's an enormous amount of time and risk to the system, and the overall productivity is going to go down in order to just call it something else rather than do the same thing, or rather like the pragmatic thing, and just allow it to be named that thing. And then Yeah, we can do it maybe over time in certain situations and so forth, but just kind of accept that part. But he would, of course, not hear me out on that one, and so yeah, we spent tons of time on doing this, and all the while the company was going under. And you are in the same situation where you have found something that is working today, bringing value to the company, and you know that it could be nicer. But that's the thing. Things can always be nicer. So what you really should ask is this hurting us? Is having Redux a part of the codebase a bad thing? Well, if you think about it, it's only bad now. Like, there's tons of people who are still using Redux. There's really no downside to using Redux because it's a good library. And so what I argue is that this is more about you than it is what's good for the company. And if it's you, this is just me talking now. If it is just you, and you can identify that it is just you that wants to do this, then you're on your way to understanding what it means to be a senior software developer, like a real senior. The type of senior that is where I draw the line between a mid-level and a senior, because a senior software developer understands which battles to fight for, and this is not a battle worth fighting for until you have answered one specific question in this regard. This is just me, because this is my first thought when I saw what you suggested doing. My first thought was, if you really were concerned about the thing that really matters, from just the, alright, I've really thought this through and I've made an informed decision, then you would have said to me, not that, well, we can remove Redux and put all this effort, because Redux is a backbone library. If you have a code base written with Redux, it is a significant thing to remove it. It's not an easy thing. So what I would have argued is that you would have started by saying, I've noticed that our bundle size is kind of big, or I've noticed that people are struggling with Redux, or I'm noticing these issues with Redux. The thing you mention is, we don't need it. It's unnecessary because we can do it in a simpler way. Yes, this is true. But as I said, that's not really a reason to remove it. And another thing to consider is that if you are working in a code base where people have already learned how to use Redux, now there's re-education and regression testing and bugs and stuff that can happen if you do something incorrectly when you change all this stuff. And in a small company, every hour is valuable. So it's really important that you focus on fixing things that will make a difference. And removing Redux in favor of the context API, I find it very unlikely that that's going to make any meaningful difference to the daily job. And that's kind of where I argue that you are probably not at the seniority level which is required in order to make a good technical improvement roadmap, or like to make an evaluation of a product and look at, okay, where are the pain points, which improvement initiatives should we start focusing on, etc., etc. You've already mentioned that the testing situation is bad, and I would start there. If you have no test environments or anything like that, then your focus should be to get this, like, say, feature flags or like different types of quality assurance pipelines and so forth in place, because that is a whole lot more important than removing a library that really doesn't make all that much of a difference at the end of the day. So what I want you to take away from this is that never waste time on things that are just nice to have when there are more critical things to take care of. I argue that, just as I've said to you before about that you have to prioritize your own learning if you're trying to become a software developer and you're starting out. You can't learn everything at the same time. You have to start somewhere. And it is much better for you to always have the mindset that I'm only at every moment going to focus on the thing that is most critical for the moment. And you continuously reevaluate that. Always. Never spend time on doing trivial things that are not, like, that unless there's something blocking you from doing the stuff that is really important. Because if you only focus on doing what is important, then either you're never going to get to these tiny little things, or you're going to get to them eventually when all the really critical stuff is unblocked. And here's the insight I hope that you can take away from that. If you never get to the stuff, if there's always something that is more important, then does the thing that you want to do really matter, or is it just an emotional itch or a mental itch that you want to scratch? Have a great day.